Good afternoon, everyone. Josh of Severe Weather. Happy Monday to you. We're going to get right to Debbie here. Appreciate you joining me. We've got ourselves, unfortunately, a lot more places that Debbie is going to be paying a visit to, and a very uncertain forecast, unfortunately, as well. But right now, we've got slow-moving Debbie, which has been downgraded to a high-end tropical storm. It'll continue to weaken and slow down as it moves into Georgia tonight and emerges into the Atlantic Ocean sometime later tomorrow night, or early on Wednesday morning. And it looks like it's going to spend some time over the warm waters of the Atlantic Ocean. And this will mean two things. Number one, since the system is going to find its moisture source over the ocean, it will continue to bring incredible amounts of rainfall to the low country from Georgia up into North Carolina, with some places picking up more than 2 feet of rain. And then number two, allowing the center to perhaps rally again and slowly strengthen as it slowly drifts eastward and offshore over the warm Gulf waters into a hurricane. And a lot of uncertainty on where this might try to come back, but there are signs that the system, instead of heading out to sea, is going to stall and eventually retreat back towards the coast. Sometime during the second half of this upcoming week, anywhere from South Carolina and Georgia line all the way up potentially to the Cape Fear region here, and even the Cape Lookout region of North Carolina. It may be until the weekend before this leaves the southeast and may impact the mid-Atlantic and the northeast over the weekend, bringing very heavy rain with it. But at the same time, there is still quite a bit of uncertainty on where this storm will head. Now, Debbie, unfortunately, made landfall very close to where Major Hurricane Idalia came in last August. So less than a year between the two systems, looking kind of similar on satellite. And unfortunately, the same communities of the Big Bend of Florida have been hit by both hurricanes. And in fact, Debbie was our fourth straight storm to impact the Gulf Coast region with some form of a landfall, albeit Alberto and Chris managed to stay south of the U.S. and affect Mexico. But obviously, Beryl and Debbie have affected the Gulf Coast of the U.S. And Debbie's not the only one on the map. We do have another wave that has eyes on the Western Caribbean here, with a 10% chance that it may become a depression in the next 2 days. More than likely, it's going to hold off until later in the week or over the weekend to start to try to form. And generally speaking, that track takes it near Jamaica, into the Yucatan, and eventually into the Western Gulf, with still some uncertainty on another future system there. Here's a look at Zoom Earth, and you can see the track of Debbie, and interestingly made a bit of a right shift, and that allowed the system to make an earlier landfall. It sped up a little bit as well. Now the system is down to 70 miles per hour and will move into South Georgia later on this evening and into the overnight hours, and slowly weaken down to 60 miles per hour tonight and 45 miles per hour by morning. That weakening trend should stop as soon as it reemerges over the Atlantic Ocean. We do have a tropical storm warning in effect here across the first coast of Florida, across the entire Georgia coast, and up the South Carolina coast here to about Georgetown. I do think we'll see this eventually extending farther up the coast into North Carolina as well, as this is a pretty big storm and has grown quite a bit. And you can see with this satellite image, it is latched onto a boundary just off the East Coast, sending moisture up into the eastern seaboard and into Atlantic Canada now. So a constant feed of moisture here, and still quite a bit of rain across Florida as well. We do now have just a tropical storm warning from Apalachicola down to near Bradenton and Longboat Key in Florida, as winds have now gone below hurricane intensity. They're still strong, but they're not as strong as they have been. So that is a look from Zoom Earth. You can see on the satellite, our system is beginning to slow down a little bit here. Still a lot of deep convection, a lot of heavy moisture coming into southwestern Florida, a lot of heavy moisture coming up into the Carolinas just offshore, but we're going to have to watch this band here. And then our main central dense overcast is over the eastern portion of the Florida Panhandle, just north of the Big Bend, and now stretching into southern Georgia. Our system is not moving quickly anytime soon. It is beginning to slow down. You will see the western side of it is better than the eastern side. And we do have some dry air that is wrapping in just north of the Tampa Bay region, very dry across the western panhandle, across Alabama. Tallahassee's kind of on the western fringe of this, but really nasty across the eastern portion here. Here's a look at the radar image that shows the landfall. The green polygons are flash flood warnings, and you can still see some very heavy rain. I don't know what's going on with my screen here. I was going to try to find, there it is. radar Omega here, kind of showing you guys a loop of the system from its landfall. And you can see that it did, in fact, wobble to the right, sparing the western part of Appalachia Bay, where the storm surge can be particularly damaging, but still pounding very hard the eastern area of the Big Bend here. You can see the system tried to organize a little bit faster last night, still had some structural challenges, but because of the right wobble, it saved it about 6 more hours of being over water, which is a good thing because it could have been stronger, but certainly 80 miles per hour is nothing that you will certainly not notice. It is a powerful system, and now the system is starting to lose that eye wall, starting to fill in, as you would imagine, with a weakening system. But we still have incredible amounts of rain moving into places like Sarasota and Bradenton and into the Tampa Bay area. The dry little tongue is just north of Spring Hill, just north of into Pasco County and just north, where there's a bit of a lull there. And we may see a few tornado warnings across inland parts of central Florida and even into northeastern Florida as well. And rain totals have been just incredible over some localized areas. If you take a look here at southwestern Florida, you can see some areas, not really southwestern Florida, but south of the bay here, some areas went over the 15-inch threshold that can be displayed on the radar. Places like Venice and Sarasota all picking up over a foot of rain. Bradenton picking up 11 inches of rain. Tampa, not as much, a little bit protected by the bay, but you can see the radar is getting active, so we are going to have more of that rain, unfortunately. Just a very nasty setup here in Central Florida. I don't have great news for Central Florida other than that the winds are going to start to die down. The surge will start coming down. Those tides will drop, but we are going to still have bands of heavy rain and maybe some isolated severe weather as well. As we head on into tonight and into tomorrow, you'll see this is going to spend potentially a couple of days back over the Atlantic Ocean. The official Hurricane Center forecast shows re-strengthening, but not yet to hurricane force. It is trending upward, and it is trending a little bit farther offshore during the Wednesday and Wednesday night time period. And I think that gives it some more time to perhaps try to re-intensify here. But I think the story here for most of us, most of the damage is going to come from freshwater flooding here from northeastern Florida through the low country of Georgia and South Carolina, and even into southern parts of North Carolina. Potentially a massive flood coming with some spots looking at their highest totals ever. Over 20 inches of rain, just incredible amounts of rain. Peak storm surge forecast still is quite high for the next few hours here over the eastern Big Bend. It lowers some to Tampa Bay, but we'll still have some flooding, 1 to 3 feet over southwestern Florida down to Bonita Beach. And also on the East Coast, we have 2 to 4 feet storm surge predicted from the Georgia-Florida line up into South Carolina, all the way to the South Santee River. And I do think that this is going to have to extend northward and may have to come up as well, depending on what happens with our storm track. You can see there's a lot of warm water still on the eastern side of Florida, not quite as warm as the Gulf, but still there will be the potential for this thing to strengthen. From 45 to 60 isn't much, and if it spends more time out over water, there's nothing, I don't think, that would stop it from becoming at least a Category 1 hurricane. But the bigger challenge is going to be where this thing gets steered, and you can see there's a lot of uncertainty here. Most of the models take it back over water, but then after that, you have a massive spread with some taking it back west into Georgia, some going north into South Carolina, and some even going up into North Carolina sometime on Wednesday night, Thursday, or even first thing on Friday. So we can look at the spaghetti all we want here, but it's going to continue to change. What I like to do is watch the trends, and there's been more of a trend on some of our ensembles to push this a little bit farther offshore, unless you believe the GFS, which has its shining moments at times, but hasn't been doing great. Now, the intensity forecast, ignore the Category 1. It's overland. It'll be a tropical storm weakening for at least the next 24 hours. After that, there is some possibility for this to re-energize and strengthen as it goes back over water in this time frame here, about 36 hours to about maybe 66 hours. So later tomorrow night into most of Wednesday and into Thursday. It's got to get back over water, but it does have that opportunity. So we do have some solutions going on the stronger side here as well. And in fact, because it's spending more time over the water as a hurricane, potentially on the East Coast, it could be more damaging there than in Florida when it comes to wind damage. Maybe not storm surge, but wind damage. The ship's forecast does show there is a potential for this to try to intensify again. Even though it's weakening now over land, it's still got a lot of relative humidity in place, warm sea surface temperatures, low wind shear until we get to the end of the week. That low wind shear actually is coming down a little bit. So if it does get over water, it is going to have a little bit more favorable environment to try to re-strengthen here. That's definitely a concern. The other concern is where this system is going to go and how fast it's going to move. So if you look here at this upper level pattern from the European, you can see our system does drift off the coast, but it's not moving very quickly. What actually happens is we do have a weaker trough coming down into the northeast. That's going to be responsible for the severe weather outbreak today and tonight in the northeast, and maybe again tomorrow. That is going to give this the possibility of at least trying to move northeast. But here's the problem. After we get past, say, the next 48 hours or so, this trough lifts out, and we actually see a ridge of high pressure off the east coast build in from the northwest. You can see that ridge right here building in, heating up the northeast, but also keeping this system from escaping. It's not going to be able to penetrate that ridge. It will actually try to drift back to the west. The European has this moving it into the Carolinas, but the GFS, on the other hand, has the ridge centered farther southward by probably about 400 miles. And that can make all the difference in a system that can get back over the water for longer or may try to sneak back onshore. Now, I don't think the GFS, well, I don't want to say it's not going to get it right, but I don't favor it as much as some of the other solutions. But I don't want to totally ignore it either. The European's been wrong on some of these as well. So European model, though, shows this moisture area, once it gets off the coast, actually improves. It fends off the dry air to its west. And there's actually going to be some structural improvement as well due to that trough to the north and west. Gives it some stronger outflow on the northern side. And that is very bad news when it comes to rain totals here across this region. Just a super moist environment, a low forward wind speed or low forward speed, and the opportunity for this thing to deepen some into the 980s, which would put it about as strong as it was here in the Gulf. But the problem here is that it's not moving nearly as quickly as it did in the Gulf. It slowed down this morning, but it did move. This is showing a 3 or 4 day vacation on the South Carolina coast, which would be really bad. So if you look at the European from Weather Belt, just to give you an idea of our storm tracks, looks like it reemerges here in about a day or so in the morning on Tuesday. Slowly offshore here Tuesday night into Wednesday, deepening over the warm Gulf Stream waters. Probably at its strongest here Wednesday night, and then the Euro brings it back into South Carolina, near Myrtle Beach or near Pawleys Island or Georgetown, somewhere in that general area. And then just drifting around and looping around, not making northward progress until Thursday night or Friday. The German icon model is probably too strong, but also shows this European type solution. It is the farthest offshore, so it will be the strongest. But you can see it brings the system back up into Brunswick County and New Hanover County here in North Carolina sometime early on Thursday. This would be pretty bad. It would be at minimum Category 1, maybe Category 2 storm. It would be better for lower parts of South Carolina and Georgia if this played out. Still going to get a lot of rain down there, but more of a threat for North Carolina if this particular run is correct. And because of that angle that it hits, it actually stays over land as it comes up into the eastern U.S., merging with a front. Her model doesn't go out that far, but it shows the offshore resumption here slowly, but tomorrow afternoon brings it offshore near Savannah, near Hilton Head Island, but does not keep it offshore for as long. You can see it tries to loop it back in a little bit sooner on Wednesday with a landfall near Myrtle Beach, and this would be a stronger tropical storm. The NAM model is also a short-term model, similar to the HER model here, just south of Charleston tomorrow night, lingering and loitering off the South Carolina coast, and bouncing around, but not really making landfall until we get to late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning with that landfall near North Myrtle Beach, and then continuing northwestward towards Florence, and then up towards Lumberton and Loris, and Fayetteville, and eventually towards the Raleigh area late Thursday evening. Canadian model, let me reload this because it's still trickling in here. Canadian model is not as strong, not surprising because it's a higher resolution model, but you can see lingering on the South Carolina coast, then coming inland Thursday afternoon, moving into North Carolina Friday, and then up into the Northeast on Saturday. GFS, gosh, I mean, what if it's right? You know, we got to give it some credit here. Takes it offshore and then yanks it right back in the exact same place here, south of Brunswick, Tybee Island, those areas here on Thursday morning, and then doesn't kill it, but it kind of just spins itself down and eventually gets picked up by our next boundary over the weekend. This would be very wet in the eastern U.S., but not quite as bad farther up the East Coast, if correct. Here's the HWRF model, and this one, kind of like the GFS, doesn't bring it out too far before trying to bring it back in. Just like a fisherman grabbing his line and pulling in and reeling in a big one here. It won't be that big, but it'll be big. I just contradicted myself. Here's the HAFS model as well. Kind of the same thing here. Yanks it back in around Data Island, Beaufort, those areas, Paris Island, and then we just have a weaker system that's dumping a lot of rain here Thursday and Friday. Let's talk about some wind. Here's the European model, and you can see we'll have tropical storm conditions here today and tonight. Northern Florida, southeastern Georgia, and then sneaking up into the low country of South Carolina by tomorrow morning. Now, the strongest winds, according to Euro, get yanked out to sea here, but you'll see as we get into Wednesday night and Thursday, pushing right back towards the upper coast of South Carolina, the Grand Strand here, and maybe some strong winds inland if this particular solution is correct. The NAM model does kind of have a slightly different look to it, but you can see stronger winds developing off the coast and then pushing back up towards the Grand Strand and towards the middle coast of South Carolina, eventually maybe getting up towards Florence and eventually Lumberton here by Wednesday into Wednesday night. I'll zoom in on the Carolinas in a minute. Here's the HER model, a lot like the NAM, kind of the same solution, some stronger wind though on the western side of this, including the not Columbia, well, maybe Columbia, but the Augusta area and well inland into Georgia here tomorrow afternoon. We may see gusts over 50 miles per hour. Farther up the coast, the European does have potentially close to hurricane force conditions all the way up into the North Carolina coast, places like Topsail Beach here, 50s as we get up to Atlantic Beach, and even 40s and low 50s for the Outer Banks here as well, even into the weekend. That's the European. The NAM doesn't go that far out, but you can see the NAM does bring some stronger winds up into southern North Carolina Wednesday afternoon. I anticipate this will spread northward Wednesday night. And the HER model doesn't go out that far, but you can see it does show intense wind over parts of the Midland. 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts could cause power outages, and we could see some intense wind along the coast as well. Rainfall, I'm going to zip through this quickly, but not a ton has changed. We do see just incredible amounts, partially from this front here in the northeast, and a lot of it, of course, from Debby. And the two do get a chance to interact here. So we've got a very big rain event coming. The official forecast showing widespread 20-plus inch rain across the low country of South Carolina. This would be a record rain for some of these folks and will inundate a lot of these areas that are low-lying around Charleston and Hilton Head and Savannah. If you are in a flood zone, now's your chance to get out. Honestly, this could be a very serious situation with this much rain falling. And we're not going to see it just stop. It's going to rain constantly as we get to overnight tonight into tomorrow, and then still raining hard Wednesday and Thursday, depending on where this lands. You can see the blend of models still keeps Florida wet as well, and eastern Georgia here, with additional amounts of over 6 inches around Jacksonville and maybe 3 to locally 6 inches in the Sarasota, Bradenton area, less off to the east and south. Incredible amounts here. 19 inches of rain in Charleston, just incredible, to be honest. And that's a blend of every model. That's just not one model. You can see up the East Coast some big totals as well into New England and the Mid-Atlantic. Potentially a foot or more of rain in parts of North Carolina and around Horry County in South Carolina, close to 10 in Florence as well. Even some heavy rain potential in the western Piedmont back to Charlotte, Hickory, Roanoke, and up to the I-81 corridor. Across the DMV area into the Delmarva, we're looking at 3 or 4 inches, higher amounts to the east, maybe up to 7 or 8. Even more as we get up into New England. And this, some of it's from Debby, but some of it's from the boundary that's just going to sit here and get stuck. We could see significant flooding again in portions of New England, New York City tri-state area, and maybe parts of Vermont, which is the last thing you want to hear there, and Maine as well. Significant rain, maybe over 4 or 5 inches as well in parts of New Brunswick, less to the east. Tornado potential continues through tonight, up the eastern seaboard into South Carolina late tonight. Tomorrow, that threat shifts mainly away from Florida into the low country. And even Wednesday, we do have a threat for some severe weather, including a few tornadoes from near Charleston and Alwendaw, all the way up to Myrtle Beach, all the way through Cape Fear, up to Cape Lookout, maybe even sneaking into the Outer Banks later Wednesday night. Let's look real quick at what's next. And nothing super organized, but something to certainly keep an eye on here moving into the Caribbean. We're getting some gusty rain over the Windward Islands. We're seeing some heavy amounts, but this wave is blowing through pretty quickly, and it's heading very low in latitude, lower than what Beryl did. So when it gets into here, we're going to have to keep an eye on it. Right now, you see the wind shear from Debby, and we see an upper low up in here, both of which are creating some hostile conditions for the system. And it will stay hostile, I think, for the next few days. After Debby leaves the area, which may not be till Thursday or Friday, we'll see this wind shear from the northeast relax, and this system will be in this area, and we are going to have to start watching it a little bit more closely at that point. Ensembles, I'll show these to you, but just, I mean, we've seen the Euro ensembles not do great already, but you can see some solutions keep it low into Mexico and Central America with development possibly. There are also solutions that bring it up into the Yucatan Channel into the West Central Gulf, and that's something obviously that's more concerning. And the time frame for this will be next Sunday evening. So we've got less than a week to potentially prepare for something else in the Gulf. There's also going to be another system to watch coming off of Africa, which some of these ensembles are beginning to try to develop here. Looking at the GFS ensembles, and you can see very low potential for this to develop until we get towards Thursday and Friday. Something to watch in Belize, the Yucatan, Cuba, maybe even the Caymans and Jamaica. And then we've got, interestingly, somewhat of a westward shift here with these models, ensemble solutions here. The reason why is after Debby moves out, hopefully it moves out, and the trough swings by, we've got high pressure building back in, creating east to west flow aloft and potentially blocking Florida from being involved in this next system and making it more of a threat towards Texas, Mexico, maybe Louisiana. We got some time on that one, so let's just not get too carried away with it yet, but we don't have a lot of time. We're going to be watching with a very busy tropical season for the next several weeks. It is hard, I know, for me personally. I know this forecast has been very difficult. I think it's been handled pretty well, honestly, but even if I get a forecast right, I'm not going to pound my chest like Noah Lyles and celebrate. We've got more work to do. And my goal is to help you guys be prepared here. I want you to be safe. I want you to take this seriously. And I want you to understand that this is an extremely difficult forecast, especially this storm. So things can change on a dime. And I will let you know if they do. So I'll be back on YouTube tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing and sharing with your friends as well, especially those in the affected areas. I thank you, and I give all the honor and glory to God. Psalm 121, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. And I think we all need more help. We all need a little bit more from above here. We can't control things. This is all turning over our battles to God and asking him to forgive us, which he has eternally for those who accepted Jesus as their Savior, but also asking him to guide us. And he may correct our paths here. He may tell us the way we're going is wrong and that there's something completely different coming. And I know he did that for me several years ago before I became a believer. But please know, we can't do anything about these natural disasters. All we can really do is do our best to respond and to be loving to each other and to support each other and to take these warnings seriously, because this weather has been very serious and this is a very serious season. All right, I hope you all have a wonderful day. I will catch up with you soon. Take care.